Now we're going to take those, we're going to take that chord progression. Now pull out your handout that says accompaniment patterns. Okay, if you've got accompaniment patterns, you can pull that out. And Patrice, can you I don't know what you guys want to look at. I don't know if you'd still like to look at the circle of fifths or if you'd like to see me, but I don't know that you can see my keyboard, so it doesn't really matter. You can make that, I don't know if we can make that smaller.
You would have to do that.
Okay, oops, I'm still on making hearts, so I better get out of that. Okay.
If you click that picture arrow on this side and make that smaller.
Yeah. It's not going very smaller.
Well,
okay.
Let's just stop the screen share. I think most everybody's got the idea.
Yeah, you guys have got it. So now look at these accompaniment patterns. You guys have them in front of you, and there's hundreds of accompaniment patterns. These are just a few that you can try out. And I want somebody to choose an accompaniment pattern off of this. You can just tell me what style.
Anya style.
Anya style? Okay, so this, thank you for not choosing the Chopin style. I have a hard time playing that and improvising at the same time. But I had a student that chose that this year, and it was turned out beautifully. Okay, so Anya, pretty basic and pretty easy to do. Now I'm going to grab my little, hang on. Sorry. My piece of paper about what I'm doing. Here it is. Okay. So our pattern C, D, G, and A minor. So, and I've found that with students, you have to play it and you have to repeat it in a circle. They start to feel like, oh, that feels like music, right? If they just come in like Jacob, I'm going back to Dark Canyon, but just for an example, if he came in and he might or might not have a great rhythm. Sometimes little kids have a string of notes and it doesn't even have a rhythm yet. You've got to show them it can turn into a rhythm. It can turn into a tune. And string it together and play it over and over. 90% of making a composition is listening. Listening to what you've got. And then imagining what it could be. So let's just listen to this chord progression. We could do it 4 times, 2, now we'll do it in 2. Now, if you go back to your handout that says writing a melody over the accompaniment, there's several ways to get started with that. And John Schmidt says he will play the accompaniment over and over and listen, and he hears a melody comes to him. I've had students that I mean, they can do this. They'll play da da dee da 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 da. You know, and I tell them, if you'll sing it, start singing it, it'll start to come to you. You know, it's It's that Schumann thing that says all you have to do to compose is remember a melody that no one else has thought of yet. I always tell them it's there. It's there in the ether. You just have to pick it out. And when they play over and over, they get that. They start to get that idea. Okay, so that's an example of hearing. Singing is the best way to hear it. Now, I want to go, we're not going to write this down. We're just going to go through and see how these ideas can help you get started with a melody. I want to go down, or I'm going to skip down to number 3 that says use an open triad. A lot of times that is a great way to get a melody started. So I need somebody to tell us what an open triad is.
It's like just a 1-5.
Think about a chord. Think it's about a triad. So you're on the right track, Lorna. You've got a 1-5. Where's the rest of the triad? The middle.
The alto.
Yeah, you put it, yeah. An open triad just means take any triad, root position chord, and take the middle out and put it an octave higher. And it creates, I call it the celestial interval, a 10th. It's just so beautiful. So, and I've got in parentheses there, The Clown by Ribikoff. And I know that many of you have taught this. And Ribikoff uses this whole song almost is open triads. This is a D minor chord with the middle taken out, and the F is in an octave higher. And you guys know that piece, many of you. And if not, it's a great little piece. Kids who are really young can learn that piece if they're familiar with triads. Okay, so let's say that we're taking our accompaniment pattern. And we're going to make an open triad to start our melody. It's a good starting point. So what note, I'm in the key of C, playing that C chord that you guys chose. What note would I start in my right hand?
E.
Yep, it's just the E. Now, isn't that pretty? Now, if I want to continue this idea of open triads before I've even got a melody, I can go to the D minor and play F. When I go to G, I could go down to B, but I might say, oh, I'm going to change it up. Now, see how we got a melody? By using the open triad, went to D here. D minor. See how you can use that? It just sounds good. And kids can take it, make some passing tones, and then create a question and an answer from that. Okay? All right, now I'm going to go back to idea number 2, which says you can create a melody over an accompaniment by writing a lyric. And we did this a little bit last time, but a lyric is kind of a great thing because it just gives you a rhythm to attach notes to. If you write a little lyric, and you don't have to use the lyric in your composition, you're just writing a lyric to attach some notes to. So I want to try this with the Enya accompaniment that we chose. I want you guys to, I've got a beginning line for us. Such a beautiful warm spring day. Okay, and we can actually tap the rhythm to that. Such a beautiful warm spring day, right? That's a lyric. Come up with a second line. We don't even have to write the rhythm, not yet. We'll have to figure it out later when we notate the piece, but for now, such a beautiful warm spring day. What could be the second line?
Let's go have a cookie picnic.
Okay. Now for kids, that's a great one. It will be easier for them if it rhymes. But you can do alternating ones.
Okay.
You got a rhyming one, Karen?
Um,
I have a rhyming one.
oh, good.
I like chewing bubble gum in the hay.
All right.
Ooh.
Perfect. See how the lyric doesn't have to be, you have to get kids off of the idea that it's got to be like, you know, serious and real and fabulous. So it doesn't, it can be, I like chewing bubble gum in the hay. All right. So if they have this in their head, I'm writing it down so I don't forget it. Okay. Such a beautiful warm spring day. I like chewing bubble gum in the hay. So now I'm going to put it on our little Enya. Such a beautiful warm spring day. So
Take out
I'm going to slow
chewing.
down. a little.
Denise, take out chewing. I like bubble gum in the
Okay.
hay. Yeah.
So you could put chewing in. I'll show you in a minute. Such a beautiful warm spring day. I like chewing bubble gum in the hay. Right? So there you go. Such a beautiful warm spring day. I like chewing bubble gum in the hay. Now, could you parlay that into a composition? Absolutely. That's a perfectly good theme. And I'm going to go back to my idea that you need to keep telling them, you're not looking for a perfect idea. You're looking for a good idea, right? And as you work with a good idea, you come up with things that make it a great idea. Okay, so that's how the lyric works. Okay, now let's stick with such a beautiful warm spring day and chewing bubble gum. And we're going to show you, I want to skip down on the handout, writing a melody over an accompaniment. Skip down to follow the melody with a third interval below. Okay, so these are, and if you go through a John Schmidt piece, you will see that he does this. He takes a melody. I like here's your third. And then the second thing down on that handout says flip it over. See how you can flip that third over and make a sixth. You put your harmony on the top instead of the bottom. So those are all ways to create more variety, more variation from the little motif, question answer, or lyric, whatever you use to create your melody. Now here's some. Now you're gonna get sick of Enya after a while, right? So now we're kind of going into the part of composition that we say, what do I do now? How can I change it up? How can I have some good variety? so we've got our little bubblegum hay thing going here. And let's say we wanted to change our accompaniment pattern. One of the things you can see how you can just keep a single note underneath the bass. You can do this with Mary Had a Little Lamb.
March.
You can do that with anything.
Denise, your
And-
mic is a little soft.
Okay, let me turn it up a little bit. So what did you miss? Did you miss?
No, it's just softer than before. So I don't know if the mic turned or something.
Okay, is this better?
Keep talking, we'll see.
Okay, we'll see if it's same as, better, worse.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not a pro with these kinds of things, but I'm trying to get better at it. Okay,
Nope, you're doing
so
good.
now, so you can have a repeating note underneath your bass. And at this point, we've got the time, we want to go back to one of your ideas that initiate is a repeating pattern. So when you have a note underneath that is repeating, you can also have a repeating pattern. Are we still good?
Yep, you're good.
Yeah, okay. My screen changed, but
Yep. Lynn,
okay.
get off the screen share. There we go.
Okay, so I had a little gal, she was 11 years old, and she's now 18.
Lynn, you're still on there.
So, but you can still hear me, right?
I can hear you, but Lynn, okay, Lynn, you gotta.
There we go. There we go. I'm glad you're here, Lynn.
Thank you.
All right. So she went away, and she's pretty astute. She came up with this pattern, and I like it because it's got a descending bass. And sometimes we forget about things like that. So Mary Had a Little Lamb could be played. Right? Sometimes we forget there's also that. Well, she came up with this little pattern in C minor. Descending bass. Now, perfectly delightful. And then she wanted to keep doing it. So she put it in the left hand and turned it into a waltz pattern. And that was her intro. It's exactly the same as the right hand. She repeated it again. And then I said, you need a melody. You got to put a melody over the top. She came back with this, and the pattern is exactly the same. Can you still hear me, Patrice?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Delightful. And then she put it up an octave higher. Then I said, okay, we need a B section. Guess what she came up with? She put it into major. She just took the C minor, put it in the C major. It's delightful. So then she created an ABA piece and went back to the minor part, and she called it Autumn in Paris. And the judge that year for UMTA said it was his most favorite piece of all the pieces that were submitted. It was in an elementary category, but repeating patterns. Kids will come up with them. They're good at it. I had a little boy this year that he came back and he said, well, I have this, but it's nothing. Of course, he just played it once. I'm like, well, Abe, that's awesome. Listen to this. It sounds like an intro. Sounds like the sun is coming up. And then I said, what can you do with it? And he's like, I'll keep the pattern the same. And then, then he was worried. He said, that sounds too girly. I said, well, let's pretend the sun is coming up. And then that can just be your intro. And then your piece can sound like anything's going to happen. And it turned into the backyard battle. And it was just delightful because he made an intro out of his repeating pattern. So repeating patterns, single notes underneath in the bass. Just on your handout, writing a melody over accompaniment. I have one down partway on the page that says the right hand and the left hand don't always have to match. Now, I tell that's how I put it to students, because once in a while you have a student that comes back and says, this is my composition. And you're like, well, let's make it a little more interesting. So then they say, so you try to say, they don't have to be that matchy. Don't make your melody the exact same notes as your left-hand chord. If you want to do this, and this might be a really young little student, let's say, use all of the notes in a 5-finger pattern. Then you have something that's much more palatable, right? They don't have to be matchy. And of course, as they get more advanced, you want non-chord tones in that composition. You want them to look for unusual harmonies. Now, down at the bottom, don't write everything on the same location in the keyboard. That's, you're always looking for ways for this composition to stay interesting. And they know, if you show them a couple times, they know when it stops being interesting. And now I've got kids that have done this for several different summers. And they're like, but is it getting too long? And sometimes you have to say, no, your idea is still good. And sometimes you say, yeah, it's time to change. So then you go to the last handout, which I haven't, and I gave it the first session. It's the one that says, what do I do now? And we haven't gone into that a whole heck of a lot, because I think most of the ideas on it are fairly self-explanatory. Just different ideas for changing things up, right? Now, I wanted to leave time for you guys to ask questions. Questions about how do we notate it? Questions about anything that I've said today. Just whatever you have questions about.
Which means everybody will need to unmute themselves now so that we can talk.
How do you notate it?
Okay, so there's a lot of different notation programs out there, and I am not a genius in any way, shape, or form in any area of my life, but I'm okay in several areas. But I use print music. It is a little section of finale, and it's way cheaper, and it's easier to manage if you're not writing orchestra scores. You don't need all of finale. So I use print music, and it's And your kids, I promise you, your kids will show you how to use it. They'll help you figure it all out. Yeah, I had a student that wanted to compose. I was never probably ever going to teach composition, but I had this kid who was an amazing pianist. He showed up and he's like, look what I made. And I'm like, oh, cool. And he's like, I found a free notation system. Let's figure out how to write it down. So anyway, that's how I got into this and learned how to do it. My students helped me a lot. I will tell you right now, when you're notating, it's kind of the long, boringest part of composition. Some of the kids come with this whole thing already in their head. Others, we make little maps. I have them, I don't make them write it out note by note. Sometimes it's good for them. So I do often have them write the main theme note by note. And then it's easier to put put the chords underneath, like a lead sheet, like a guitar tab. You can put the chords that you're going to use underneath, and then they can remember and practice it. They can remember the patterns. But putting it in, the more advanced the student and the more complicated the rhythms, you have to listen, both of you. I've never put it in for them. We do it together. We come into this room where the electric piano is, and I sit down with the mouse and they sit down over here. Those programs always have a thing where you can play it. If you've got the MIDI, you can play it and it'll, and I have people asking me all the time, well, don't you just have a thing where the kid can play the song and then it's already printed? And I'm like, yeah, but it's never that easy. And in fact, over the years, I do that less and less and do more of the, just choose whatever the note value is and have them play it till the note value changes. That's actually turned out to be quicker. Sometimes the hardest part is figuring out what rhythm they are playing, especially when they're advanced. And you just have to listen a lot, and both of you have to like count and tap it and play it again and again. But it's very satisfying.
Denise, do you ever assign them to do this at home, or is it always just in your studio?
Which part of it? Any of it?
Composition.
Yes, absolutely. They do part of it at home. I'll say, okay, now you've got to come up with an answer for this question. And I'll send them off to figure that out. And some of them will come back. If they've come back a second week without an idea, they're not playing around at home. They're not fiddling around enough. So sometimes, this is pretty rare, but sometimes you almost have to like help them come up with an idea. This is a thing that happens quite often. They'll come with a little statement. Oh, let me see if I can find one here quick. They'll come and they'll play. And I'll say, ooh, that's great, but it sounds already finished. So what they've created is they've created an answer, and you have to teach them, we got to have a question first. You always got to have a question before you can have an answer. And that teaches them a lot of things. You can teach them how a question never ends on the tonic and doesn't sound like your piece is already finished. So,
well, and that Mary Had a Little Lamb is a great example of that. Something so simple, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can little Bach pieces. And oh, here's the cool thing. When you start teaching composition, they start recognizing things in their classical or their book method books. They start recognizing, oh, this is a question. Oh, look, this is a parallel answer. Bach has some. Everybody has some. Mozart, questions and answers, contrasting and parallel. It's very fun when they start seeing those patterns. And if they don't, you can point them out. You can point them out.
We need to wind up in just about 1 or 2 more minutes.
Okay, are there any more questions? Oh, I wanted to emphasize something. I've been asking my students, especially my advanced ones, if you didn't understand chords very well, could you make good compositions? And they're all like, no. When they sit down and they just start to play, they're playing in chords and they're playing in different keys. How do you guys teach your kids to be comfortable with chords in every key? How does some of you guys do it?
Cadence playing is huge. I mean, as my students get older, and this is where AIM has been very beneficial to me, because when you have to play those cadences in the two other inversions, thank you, Caroline, you really pushed that a couple of years ago, and it's amazing. And so I think cadence need to be a big part.
Yeah, if you teach the AIM technique year by year, they will get it. And I know some teachers who wait until it's just before AIM and teach them 3 keys. Do it every lesson. Do it every lesson all year long. Go around that circle of fifths till you're dizzy. And up the skill every time. Up the skill, you know, start with 5-finger patterns. Always start with 5-finger patterns. I learned that from Marvin Blickenstaff, who I'm related to. My maiden name's Blickenstaff. Anyway, 5-finger patterns, round the circle of fifths. Then add cadences to the 5-finger patterns. Then add the parallel minors to the 5-finger patterns and the minor cadences. Then at some point, and hands together, hands separate first, graduate to scales. You know the rigmarole, the inversions, broken inversions, however you do it, stick with it and do it every single week.
The thing though that I have discovered in my own teaching versus how I was taught is I use the right vocabulary with my students. And I force them to know what the tonic means, what the dominant means. And so we have a vocabulary to talk about it. Whereas when I was growing up, I didn't get any of that theory, but I was doing scales and arpeggios and everything, but I couldn't really tell you exactly what was going on and what was. So just, I mean, 5-year-olds can understand the vocabulary if you're careful about it and like start with 5-finger patterns and things. Like you just use the vocabulary.
Thank you, Caroline. I needed to hear that. That's one reason why I said sometimes kids, they're at level 10 and they still don't get those relationships. It's because I'm not using the vocabulary enough. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I will say, when I grew up, I didn't know there was such thing as a key. I could play in any key, but I didn't know that it was a key. So yeah.
Me
Have
too.
Hopefully.
Have you heard
Me
of the
too.
number system? Because it was new to me because I grew up with Roman numerals, but now they're doing number system and just using the numbers 1, 6M, you know.
Yeah.
So actually using the numbers, not Roman numerals. So that's a kind of a interesting
What's
new way
that called, Lorna?
They call it the number system. So instead of Roman numerals, they're actually using the numbers. So A minor would be 6M, D minor would be 2M. Yeah.
Is that the Nashville system?
I don't know. It's just on the more contemporary, I think, where they're doing it in churches and stuff like that.
I haven't.
Can you weigh in on that? Because I want to say that might be, because I've heard Nashville has like their number system. I've heard it called the Nashville number system, but I've never actually seen it. So I was wondering if that's maybe what that is, Lorna.
I can find out if that's another name for it. But
You know,
it makes sense, but it just threw me like, wait, but that doesn't, you know, to notate things like that. Now it does make sense because when you transpose in any key, it's the same progression. So they're just notating it differently now. Well,
I think in college theory, though, they're still using Roman numerals from what I understand.
Sure.
I use Roman numerals because, and I explain it to the kids, and now they don't learn about a clock. Everything's digital, but I have a big clock in my studio that's Roman numerals, and they catch on fast. But I say we use so many numbers in music, finger numbers, counting numbers, that when we use a Roman numeral, we know we're talking about a chord. So, but I can see how it would be easier in some applications. Yeah.
Well, are we good? We are out of time.
I just want to say, Denise, thank you so much. I think your presentation in these last 2 sessions have been one of the best organized and accessible topics on composition I've ever heard. And I'm actually practicing it with my students, which is unheard of in my studio. And so I just like, it's actually accessible and I absolutely love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. That means a lot to me because I feel like I have imposter syndrome to the max.
No, it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thanks for asking me. It's really been fun. Nancy, good to see you. It's been fun to do this.
Okay, with that, we will end.
Thank
Next month in April, we are having Dr. Allred will be presenting on perfect practice, which will be great.
Ooh, can I
Well,
come?
you're invited. Yeah, San Juan chapter's invited. So remind me to send you the link.
Okay.
So with that, I hope everybody has a wonderful March, a great spring break. Be safe. Karen, did you want to say anything in parting?
Yes, thank you, Patrice. Thanks for getting it going. Okay, we'll see you guys soon.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye.
everybody.